Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast, podcast number 153. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Saturday, December the 28th from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. Well, on Friday, yesterday, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do the podcast on Saturday. What was going to be my topic? Because normally stuff happens throughout the week and I think, okay, this will be a good topic. That'll be a good topic. I have 2 or 3 different topics to lull about and think about and decide upon. But as of Friday morning, I had no topic yet. I thought, well, shoot, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. And then Don Imus passed away. And there was no other choice but to do the podcast on the life of a guy who I thought was arguably the most groundbreaking, trailblazing radio broadcaster of all time. Now, some of you may be thinking, really? Imus? Well, he was just that mumbling cowboy hat wearing guy that was hooked up to oxygen and could hardly breathe or talk on Fox News or the Fox Business Channel. Well, okay, in the end, he was, but he was a whole lot more than that. So the podcast today, my essay today is going to be on the life of Don Imus, what he was all about, what I saw him as, what others saw him as well. And when I talk about others, I'm going to talk about those who loved him and those who hated him, because he was certainly a polarizing figure. And you can certainly understand why many loved him and many hated him. Actually, I don't know why anyone would have hated him, but I can understand why they hated the things he said, did, and did not appreciate his radio show. That's going to be the topic of my essay. Before we do that, a couple of things. One item in the news and then one item just kind of off the cuff. I've had comments by many people over a long period of time in the past wanting to know why I don't do the podcast as a video cast, because a lot of people do. And video, I understand, is a format that many people, especially younger people, tend to gravitate towards. And I will tell you, I have considered it. In fact, once upon a time, you may have considered, I used to do about a 60-second Facebook video, just a preview of the show. Okay. I don't do that anymore just because, well, quite honestly, I don't want to. All right. It never did trip my trigger. I never did enjoy it. I saw it as an obligation, and I didn't want to do it anymore. But there are people who do YouTube videos, Facebook videos. In fact, they a lot of times they just put a camera on and it's a simulcast so you can watch while you're listening. While I've never understood why anyone would want to do that, I also understand it's something that a lot of people want to do. In fact, 2 broadcasters who I greatly respect, Mark Kaysen and Jimmy Church, they both do this, okay? And I guess, well, I'll tell you the main reason I don't do it. And then let me talk to you about what Mark Kaysen does and what Jimmy Church does. Mark Kaysen has a live video, audio broadcast every day, every weekday at 3:30, okay, from his studio in Clayton, atop the University Club Tower. Very nice studio. I've been there. I was on Mark's show one time. And he comes in a suit and tie, which, in my opinion, if you're going to be on the air, you need to look presentable. So kudos to Mark for getting all dialed up for his podcast. I don't want to do that. And then there's Jimmy Church, who, quite frankly, for his video broadcast, looks like he just rolled out of bed. His hair's a mess. He's not shaven. He has on yesterday's clothes. And I don't know why anybody would want anyone to see him looking like that. So you have both extremes. Now, maybe because I'm closer to Mark's age than Jimmy's, a little bit. Maybe I understand why Mark does what he does, and I don't want to put forth the effort. I don't understand why Jimmy does what he does, because I have enough trouble just looking in the mirror, much less wanting people to look at me on the video. So, a long story short, actually it's not too short because we're over 5 minutes into the podcast. To make a long story short, you're not going to be seeing me on video anytime soon. That's not to say you're never going to see it, but don't hold your breath because I'm not doing it for the foreseeable future, okay? Also, a story in the news. Let me take a sip of my coffee here. Now, while it's currently 7:19 in the morning while I'm doing this podcast, I've been up since 4:30, 4:40, something like that. So I've already had a full pot of a wonderful, outstanding Colombian roast coffee. But it ran out. I had my 10 cups. The trophy wife had her 2 cups. But I needed a cup for the broadcast because I'm still nursing the very tail end of this dopey cold. See, that's how live radio works. I didn't have a cough button, so I just coughed. But actually, I do have a cough button with this new Rodecaster, so maybe I ought to start using that. What do you think? Anyway, so I'm sipping a not-so-good feces-tasting cup of Keurig coffee. And it's, I don't know what it is. It's some type of a instant Keurig coffee blend. So it doesn't taste good, but it does the trick of clearing my mouth, clearing my head, and giving me one more extra boost of caffeine. But the news story I wanted to talk about before I get into my podcast, my homage to the great Don Imus, nobody's hearing much about Hong Kong. And I wanted to talk again about Hong Kong. I would say probably half of my Facebook posts have been about Hong Kong. I will also say those Facebook posts get almost no comments or likes. And I get that because it's not as exciting as the Trump impeachment. It's not as exciting as UFO landings. It's not as exciting as cat videos. In fact, it's rather boring. But Hong Kong is important for me because nobody else is talking about it. Because, and I think the I don't want to say mainstream media, I don't like that term. Traditional media sources, they're not talking about it because it doesn't involve Trump's impeachment. And that's all anybody wants to talk about. Fucking Trump's impeachment. I'm so sick of hearing about it, but that's all anyone wants to talk about for whatever reason. Okay. Hong Kong is part of China. It's called what they call a special administrative region, and it's been that way since 1997. The Brits leased Hong Kong from China in 1888. It was a 100-year lease. After 100 years, it was over, and the Brits gave it back to China. Okay. Hong Kong for years was the trading capital of the Orient, and it's still a very, very big spoke in the hub of the Asian market trade system. They have a separate system, although they are part of communist China. Okay. And now the protests, they've had big time protests and big time problems since June, because back in June, the mainland basically said, hey, you know what? We're going to have a new rule here. I know we're 2 different regions, 2 different countries, all under one flag, kind of, but you guys have special rules, special freedoms that we don't have in the mainland. And we understand that, and we tolerate that because your economy puts ours to shame, relatively speaking. We talk about the size of the people, 7.5 million people live in Hong Kong. And 1.4 billion live in China, okay? And when you compare the GDP compared to the number of people who live there, it's not even comparative. So the communist Chinese tolerate a lot from the Hong Kong government. You can protest. They even have kind of elections where they elect like city council members and that type of thing. That they have a lot of freedoms in Hong Kong they don't have in the mainland. But back in June, they said, you know what? Starting right now, if we decide to bring you to the mainland and try you for something you've done wrong, we're going to do it. Used to be you had to be tried in Hong Kong under a Hong Kong court, which is actually pretty fair. In mainland China, they have a nearly 100% conviction rate in their courts. In other words, if you're charged, you're convicted. Well, the people lost their shit. They protested. They firebombed. They turned the city upside down. and the government backed off. They said, okay, we won't send people to the mainland for trial. You win. Well, the people got a taste of authority, and they said, okay, we also want more elected positions. We also want more freedom. Eventually, we want a path to a separate nation. Well, that's never going to happen. The Chi-Coms are never going to do that. They back down on trying people in a Hong Kong court or in a mainland Chinese court, but they're not going to back down on the number one demand of the protesters, and that's freedom. The Chinese communists will never, ever, ever do that. And since June, they've had riots. It's a city of 7.5 million people. It's a city in chaos. Their economy is suffering very much so. Commerce is down. Entertainment is down. Most people who live in Hong Kong, which is a very expensive city to live in very tiny apartments. In fact, there are some people in Hong Kong who just rent sleeping spaces, and these sleeping spaces are what they call coffins. Picture, it's a bed, okay, but picture a stack of drawers. In fact, picture your workbench, gentlemen. And I have one of these on my workbench. It's a box with little 2x2 squares, and you slide little drawers out, and you keep different screws in these little squares. That's what these coffin apartments are kind of like. They're a little cubby hole, like a shelf that you would put mail in the old hotel days. Okay, and that's where you sleep. And it's about 4 feet wide, 3 feet tall, and 6 feet deep. That's it. That's where you live. Okay? That's all a lot of people have. So needless to say, they don't spend a whole lot of time in their apartment because their apartment leaves a lot to be desired. And Hong Kong is, in my opinion, the most exciting city in the world. So if you live in the most exciting city in the world, where would you rather be? In your 3x4x6 coffin apartment, or out on the streets experiencing the most exciting city in the world? Well, if you've got people throwing Molotov cocktails at the police and police tear gassing the protesters, it's hard to do that. And the Chinese communists are not going to back down, in my opinion. I would love to see them back down some more. I would love to see them compromise. I would love to see the communist Chinese government saying, okay, of these 6 demands that you have, we're going to give you 3 of them. But you're not going to get the other 3. Have the protesters back down, sit back, see how this works for a number of years, and then perhaps go back to the table if it doesn't work for them. That's the peaceful way to do that. I don't think the protesters are going to back down. I don't think the Chinese Communist government is going to give them 1 iota of freedom. So where does that put us? Well, I will say this. There are a few that are speaking out against the Chinese government, the communist Chinese government, okay? And by the way, when I call them the communist Chinese government, the Chi-Coms, I'm not really making fun of them. Chi-Coms is just a short word for communist Chinese, and they are communist. They are, okay? It's not a name-calling deal. They are the communist Chinese. They are the Chi-Coms. And when I say few are speaking out, the biggest people who I criticize for not speaking out against the repressive Chinese communist government are the NBA players. The NBA players have always scratched my head because many of them, not all of them, not even most of them, but many of them, LeBron James being the biggest one, have more money than God and run their mouth mercilessly when it comes to things that they think are a social justice warrior concern. You know what? You've got the stage. You've got the money. It's a free country. You can do it with as you please. But they will not criticize the Chinese Communist government. They will not do it because the Chinese Communist government puts money in their pocket. They have sneaker deals. The sneakers are made in China. People in China love the NBA. People in China love to see their stuff. They love to buy the LeBron James stuff. They love to see them play, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the social justice warriors and the NBA will not stand up against the Chinese communists because, as social justice warriors always do, well, the big industrial complex, the people with the money, the blah, 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 blah. Okay, I make more money than God, and I will not talk out against people who repress everybody but those in the party and don't agree with them because it takes money out of my pocket.